March 17th, 1945. Eastern bank of the Rhine River, near Remagen. Hauptmann Klaus Weber pressed his eye against the rubber cushion of his commander's optic, watching the American armor column materialize through morning fog like steel ghosts crossing into Germany's heartland. His Panther tank sat hull down behind a collapsed brewery, its long 75mm gun trained on the approaches to the damaged Ludendorff Bridge. 40 meters to his left, Oberfeldwebel Ernst Hartmann commanded a Tiger, its 88mm cannon representing the pinnacle of German anti-tank technology. Between them, they possessed enough firepower to stop a battalion, or so doctrine promised. Through his optic, Weber identified the lead vehicle, an M4 Sherman, but something was wrong with the proportions. The turret sat higher, bulkier. The main gun extended nearly a full meter longer than standard 76mm Shermans they had been facing since Normandy. His tactical mind, trained at Wünsdorff Panzer School and sharpened through 3 years of Eastern Front combat, catalogued the discrepancy with growing unease. Hartmann, Weber spoke into his throat microphone, his voice steady despite the ice forming in his stomach. The lead Sherman. You see the gun tube? Static crackled. Then Hartmann's rough Brandenburg accent replied, Ja, Herr Hauptmann. That is not 76mm. Looks like our 88. Weber's gunner, Unteroffizier Paul Richter, had already ranged the target. 1800 meters, Herr Hauptmann. Textbook engagement range. We have superior optics, superior position. His confidence carried the certainty of a man who had destroyed 43 enemy tanks across Russia and France. The mathematics should favor them absolutely, but Weber hesitated. Something in that elongated barrel spoke to battlefield realities that transcended firing tables and armor penetration charts. 500 kilometers west in the Ardennes forest, American tank crews had learned brutal lessons about German gunnery superiority. Now, crossing the Rhine into Germany proper, those same crews were about to deliver an education in industrial escalation. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The fog lifted in patches, revealing more of the American column. 12 Shermans, spacing themselves professionally, hatches buttoned tight for combat. Weber noticed something else. These tanks moved with the careful confidence of veterans, not the aggressive inexperience of replacement units. Their positioning suggested crews who understood German tank doctrine and were prepared for it. His mind calculated trajectories, penetration values, crew reaction times. The Panther's 75mm gun could penetrate standard Sherman frontal armor at 2,000 meters. The Tiger's 88 could reach, further still. But that new American gun changed every assumption. If the Americans had finally matched German gun technology, then Germany's last tactical advantage was evaporating with the morning mist. 3 years earlier, in the summer of 1942, American ordnance engineers at Aberdeen Proving Ground confronted a crisis that threatened to undermine the entire armored doctrine. Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Davidson spread reconnaissance photographs across the analysis table, each image documenting the same devastating story. Destroyed American tanks littering North African battlefields, their armor pierced cleanly by German shells, fired from ranges American guns could not reciprocate. The M4 Sherman had been designed around a 75mm gun, adequate for infantry support, but increasingly obsolete against German armor. Davidson traced his finger across a photograph, showing a Sherman knocked out near Kasserine Pass, the penetration hole perfectly centered on the bay. Turret front. Gentlemen, he addressed the gathered engineers and ordnance officers, we are sending our tank crews to die in machines outgunned by everything the Germans field above a Panzer III. The room fell silent with the uncomfortable truth that patriotic rhetoric could not disguise. German Tiger tanks mounted 88mm guns, capable of destroying Shermans at 3,000 meters. German Panthers carried 75mm high-velocity guns that penetrated American armor like paper. American tankers reported engaging German tanks only to watch their shells bounce harmlessly off angled armor, followed by return fire that transformed Shermans into crematoriums. Major Thomas Harrison, representing Field Ordnance Liaison, stood to deliver first-hand accounts from North Africa. Our crews are brave, competent, aggressive. But bravery does not defeat physics. A German gunner in a Tiger can destroy 5 Shermans before any American gun gets within effective range. We are asking our tankers to close range through killing zones, where German optics and guns dominate completely. The photographs documented this tactical nightmare comprehensively. Shermans destroyed at extreme range, their hulls penetrated from angles that should have offered protection. German tanks knocked out only after multiple American vehicles maneuvered within 500 meters, accepting catastrophic losses to achieve kills. The arithmetic was unsustainable. America possessed industrial capacity to replace destroyed tanks faster than Germany, but replacing trained crews took months. Davidson moved to a ballistics chart covering the conference room wall. The German 88mm Qui 43 fires a 17-pound projectile at 1,000 meters per second, generating sufficient energy to penetrate 180 millimeters of armor at 2,000 meters. Our 75mm M3 gun fires a 15-pound shell at 600 meters per second, penetrating only 90 millimeters at the same range. He let those numbers settle like stones in deep water. We are not fighting a fair engagement. We are fighting a massacre enabled by superior German gunnery. The solution required thinking beyond incremental improvements. Simply upgrading to the 76mm gun, already in development, would not bridge the gap sufficiently. American ordnance needed a weapon that could match or exceed German anti-tank capability while fitting within the Sherman's basic architecture. The challenge involved metallurgy, ballistics, recoil management, and production logistics on a scale that would test American industrial capacity. Colonel Richard Ernst from Springfield Armory proposed the solution that would change American tank warfare. We develop a 90mm anti-aircraft gun for tank mounting, high muzzle velocity, superior penetration, and sufficient stopping power to defeat any German armor at extended range. The concept faced immediate skepticism. 90mm guns generated enormous recoil forces, requiring substantial mounting systems. The Sherman's turret ring and hull would need extensive modification. Production tooling would demand complete retooling. Training programs would require revision. Ammunition logistics would grow more complex. Each objection represented genuine engineering challenges that could delay implementation for years. But Davidson understood the alternative. Continue sending tank crews into battle with inadequate weapons, accepting losses that experience could not offset. Gentlemen, he said quietly, the Germans spent a decade developing their tank doctrine before this war began. We have been playing catch-up since Pearl Harbor. Every month we delay developing a competitive gun costs American lives we cannot replace. I want prototype testing to begin within 6 months. The room stirred with the enormity of that timeline. 6 months to design, machine, test, and validate a completely new tank gun system represented engineering acceleration beyond anything American ordnance had attempted, but total war demanded impossible timelines. The alternative was unthinkable. In workshops across Massachusetts and Maryland, engineers began the patient, methodical work of translating battlefield necessity into mechanical reality. They studied captured German guns, measuring bore dimensions, analyzing metallurgy, calculating propellant charges. They consulted with British ordnance officers who had faced similar challenges in North Africa. They interviewed American tank commanders who returned from combat with precise descriptions of what they needed. The requirements crystallized into specifications that would govern every subsequent design decision: muzzle velocity exceeding 900 meters per second, penetration capability defeating 150 millimeters of armor at 1,000 meters, elevation and depression angles matching Sherman, operational doctrine, recoil system managing forces without cracking turret rings, ammunition design allowing reasonable storage within existing hull space. Each specification represented compromises between ideal performance and practical constraints. The gun tube required steel alloys that could withstand chamber pressures exceeding 40,000 pounds per square inch without warping after repeated firing. The recoil mechanism needed hydraulic dampening systems that could absorb massive energies without leaking under combat vibration. The mounting system demanded precision machining, maintaining accuracy after thousands of rough terrain kilometers. By autumn of 1942, the first prototype 90mm tank gun underwent testing at Aberdeen. Engineers filled notebooks with firing data, measuring everything measurable: muzzle velocity, chamber pressure, barrel wear, recoil distance, accuracy at range. Each test revealed problems requiring solutions. The initial recoil system cracked welds after 50 rounds. The ammunition feeding mechanism jammed under rapid firing. The gun mount flexed under stress, throwing off aim. Davidson watched each test with the intense focus of someone who understood that every failure documented now prevented battlefield catastrophes later. When a prototype breech exploded during high-pressure testing, showering the test bay with fragments, he ordered metallurgical analysis before allowing any recriminations. The failure revealed improper heat treatment in a casting batch. The solution required tighter quality control specifications across every supplier. The testing accelerated through winter. New prototypes arrived weekly, each incorporating lessons from previous failures. Gun tubes machined to tighter tolerances, recoil systems redesigned with heavier springs, ammunition modified for more consistent propellant burn rates. The evolution was methodical, obsessive, driven by the knowledge that young men's lives depended on getting every detail correct. By spring of 1943, the 90mm gun achieved consistent penetration of 170mm of armor at 1,000 meters. That performance exceeded German Tiger frontal armor specifications. It meant American gunners, for the first time in the war, could engage German heavy tanks at ranges where survival became possible. The breakthrough represented more than engineering success. It represented battlefield parity, purchased through industrial determination. But mounting the gun in existing Sherman hulls presented additional challenges, requiring solutions that tested American manufacturing ingenuity. The standard M4 Sherman's turret ring measured 69 inches in diameter, barely sufficient for the original 75mm gun and three-man crew. The 90mm gun required substantially more space for recoil travel, ammunition storage, and crew operations. Simply widening the turret ring meant redesigning the entire hull, a modification that would halt Sherman production for months while retooling occurred. American industry could not afford that delay. The invasion of Europe was scheduled for 1944, requiring thousands of tanks operational and combat-ready. Any production interruption would cascade through logistics chains, supplying multiple theaters of war. The solution demanded retrofitting the new gun into existing designs with minimal structural changes. Lead engineer Robert Morrison approached the problem with the systematic methodology that characterized American wartime engineering. His team measured every millimeter of available turret space, calculated recoil forces against structural load limits, and designed mounting systems that distributed stress across reinforced turret rings. The work required precision difficult to achieve in rushed wartime conditions, but Morrison understood that field failures would cost more than careful development. The prototype turret, designated T-26, featured a bustle extension providing space for radio equipment displaced by the larger gun breech. The turret face received additional armor, increasing thickness to 3 inches at critical points. The gun mantlet was redesigned to accommodate the 90mm tube's greater length and weight. Each modification added tonnage that had to be balanced against the Sherman's suspension and engine capacity. Testing revealed unexpected complications. The increased turret weight raised the vehicle's center of gravity, reducing stability on slopes. The longer gun tube created balance issues during high-speed maneuvers. The ammunition, each 90mm round weighing 40 pounds compared to 15 pounds for 75mm shells, reduced available storage from 90 rounds to 60. Every advantage extracted payment in tactical flexibility. Morrison's team addressed each problem through careful iteration. They redesigned the suspension with heavier torsion bars. They added counterweights to improve turret balance. They modified ammunition racks for easier loading despite the heavier shells. The evolution consumed 6 months of intensive engineering, during which battlefield reports from Italy and France documented continued American tank losses to superior German gunnery. By December of 1943, the first production-ready T-26 medium tank, soon redesignated M26 Pershing, began final validation testing. The 90mm gun performed flawlessly through 3,000 test rounds, demonstrating consistent accuracy and penetration. The turret system proved stable through aggressive maneuvers. The ammunition handling allowed experienced crews to maintain firing rates of 6 rounds per minute, but production delays and bureaucratic resistance within American armored doctrine prevented rapid deployment. Senior tank commanders, wedded to the Sherman's proven reliability and ease of manufacture, questioned whether a more powerful gun justified the complexity and cost. They argued that American numerical superiority, combined with tactical air support, could overcome German technological advantages without redesigning the entire tank fleet. That debate cost months while American tankers continued facing Tigers and Panthers with inadequate firepower. Lieutenant Colonel Davidson, frustrated by institutional resistance, compiled casualty reports demonstrating the human cost of delayed implementation. Each week's delay represented dozens of destroyed Shermans and hundreds of casualties that superior guns might have prevented. The breakthrough came in late 1944, when Pershing tanks finally reached European battlefields in limited numbers. Combat reports documented their effectiveness immediately. American crews engaging German Panthers at 1,000 meters reported successful frontal penetrations, something impossible with earlier guns. The psychological impact on German tank commanders proved as significant as the tactical advantage, but full production of 90mm armed tanks required time American forces did not have. The compromise solution involved upgrading existing Sherman hulls with the new gun, creating the M4A3E8 variant that combined Sherman mobility with Pershing-level firepower. These hybrid vehicles represented American industrial pragmatism, optimizing battlefield effectiveness within production constraints. By early 1945, as Allied forces crossed the Rhine into Germany proper, several hundred 90mm armed Shermans operated alongside standard variants. German intelligence had noted these new vehicles but underestimated their tactical significance. German tank doctrine, developed around maintaining standoff range where 88mm guns dominated, had not adapted to American capability improvements. That doctrinal lag was about to extract a price measured in destroyed German armor and shattered tactical assumptions. Back on the Rhine, Hauptmann Weber watched the modified Sherman advance with professional unease that transcended normal pre-combat tension. His loader, Gefreiter Hans Müller, broke the silence. Herr Hauptmann, permission to engage? Range is optimal. Weber's thumb hovered over the firing button. Standard doctrine demanded immediate engagement at maximum range. The Panther's superior optics and gun should allow first-round hits before the Sherman could return effective fire. But that elongated American gun tube suggested equations had changed in ways German tactical manuals had not acknowledged. "Hold fire," Weber commanded, his voice surprising even himself. "I want to observe their behavior first." Through his optic, he watched the Sherman's turret traverse smoothly, the long 90mm gun sweeping across potential German positions with methodical precision. The commander's hatch remained closed, indicating combat vigilance. The tank moved, with the careful spacing suggesting coordination with other vehicles in the column. These were not replacement crews rushing forward with more enthusiasm than skill. These were veterans who had survived the Bulge, crossed France, and learned German tactics through bitter experience. Hartmann's voice crackled through the radio. "Herr Hauptmann, I have clear shot at lead vehicle. Request permission to fire." Weber watched the American column continue its deliberate advance. At 1,500 meters, They would enter the range where even the new American gun could theoretically penetrate Panther frontal armor. At 1,000 meters, German advantages in armor and optics would diminish significantly. The tactical mathematics that had favored German tanks since 1941 were approaching equilibrium. Negative, Weber replied. We observe their capabilities first. If they can match our range, we need intelligence for higher command. It was a decision that would define the next 30 minutes of combat and reveal how decisively American industrial determination had altered the battlefield's fundamental equations. The fog continued lifting, and Weber felt history shifting with it, transforming assumptions that had governed German tank doctrine since the invasion of Russia. The American Sherman column advanced with methodical precision, each vehicle maintaining intervals suggesting experienced crews who understood combined arms tactics. Weber noticed their movement pattern, advance by bounds with some vehicles stationary, providing overwatch while others moved forward. This was not the aggressive charge of inexperienced units. This represented coordination drilled through combat experience. His radio operator, Oberfeldwebel Franz Keller, monitored battalion frequency, documenting radio traffic that painted a broader tactical picture. Herr Hauptmann, battalion reports American armor crossing at 3 additional bridge points. Heavy concentrations, at least. Company strength at each location. The information confirmed Weber's assessment. This was not a probing attack, but a coordinated offensive, exploiting the Remagen bridgehead before German forces could organize effective counterattacks. American commanders were pressing their advantage with the aggressive confidence of forces knowing strategic initiative had shifted decisively in their favor. Through his optic, Weber tracked the lead Sherman as it approached 1,400 meters range. His gunner had maintained perfect tracking, the aiming reticle centered precisely on the Sherman's frontal hull, where ammunition storage offered vulnerable target. At this range, the Panther's 75mm gun could penetrate and catastrophically detonate stored shells, transforming the enemy tank into a funeral pyre visible for kilometers. Herr Hauptmann, Richter's voice carried restrained tension. I have maintained aim for 2 minutes. This is optimal engagement window. Weber understood his gunner's frustration. Every second of delay allowed the Americans to close range where their numerical superiority could overwhelm German technical advantages. Standard doctrine demanded engaging at maximum effective range, destroying lead vehicles to create obstacles blocking following tanks. But Weber's tactical instinct, honed through 3 years of surviving against numerically superior forces, whispered warnings his training could not dismiss. The lead Sherman's turret rotated suddenly, the long gun tube swinging toward Weber's concealed position with deliberate purpose. The American commander had spotted something, perhaps sunglint off optics, perhaps disturbed camouflage. The turret movement demonstrated immediate threat recognition and rapid response, characteristics of veteran crews who had learned to survive in killing zones. Engaging, Weber commanded, his voice steady despite his pounding heart. Gunner, target tank, 1,300 meters. Identified. Richter responded with ritual precision. The Panther lurched backward as the 75mm gun discharged with a crack that echoed across the Rhine Valley. Weber watched the tracer arc gracefully through morning air, knowing from countless engagements exactly where the armor-piercing round would impact. His crew had destroyed 43 enemy tanks through combinations of superior positioning, exceptional gunnery, and aggressive tactics that minimized American numerical advantages. The round struck the Sherman's frontal hull low, where welded armor plates created slight angles that could defeat imperfectly aligned shots. Weber watched for the telltale flash of penetration, the brief moment where kinetic energy transformed metal into molten fragments that would detonate ammunition and kill crew. Instead, he saw the round deflect upward, gouging a furrow across armor but failing to penetrate. Scheiße, Richter muttered. Deflection. Before Weber could process implications, the Sherman's 90mm gun fired. The muzzle flash appeared massive, like a camera bulb erupting in the morning dimness. Weber's combat instinct made him flinch involuntarily, an unconscious recognition that something fundamentally dangerous had just occurred. The American shell crossed 1,300 meters in less than 2 seconds, traveling at velocities Weber's mind couldn't fully process. It struck the Panther's frontal glacis at an angle that should have offered maximum protection, the carefully calculated 60-degree slope designed to defeat exactly this type of attack. German metallurgists had spent years perfecting armor that would deflect or shatter incoming rounds through combination of hardness, thickness, and geometry. The 90mm armor-piercing round cared nothing for those calculations. 24 pounds of hardened steel traveling at 2,800 feet per second carried kinetic energy that overwhelmed German defensive theory. The penetrator punched through 80 millimeters of face-hardened armor as if it were sheet metal, the hypervelocity impact creating a jet of molten metal that sprayed through the crew compartment like liquid fire. Weber felt the impact through his entire body, a hammer blow that rang the tank like a cathedral bell. Richter screamed once, briefly, then fell silent as fragments found him, the interior filled with acrid smoke and the copper smell of vaporized metal. Keller was gasping, making wet sounds that suggested lung damage. Mueller had disappeared entirely, his position at the loader's station directly in the penetrator's path. Weber's ears rang with profound deafness, but his survival instinct overrode shock. "Bail out!" he shouted, though he couldn't hear his own voice. "Raus! Raus! Raus!" He clawed for the commander's hatch, fingers slipping on controls, suddenly slick with blood he didn't remember seeing. The hatch opened to cold March air that felt like salvation. Weber hauled himself through the opening with strength born from pure terror, knowing that secondary ammunition detonation could occur within seconds. He tumbled off the Panther's engine deck and rolled into a crater, covering his head instinctively. The explosion came 10 seconds later, ammunition cooking off in a chain reaction that transformed 45 tons of steel into a funeral pyre. Weber risked a glance back and saw flames erupting from every hatch, black smoke climbing toward low clouds. 3 men dead. His crew, whom he'd kept alive through Russia, through France, through the long retreat into Germany, dead in seconds because an American gun had reached across 1,300 meters and negated every advantage German engineering had provided. Hartmann's voice crackled weakly through Weber's damaged radio headset, somehow still functioning despite the catastrophe. "Mein Gott, they penetrated your glacis. At this range?" The disbelief was absolute. "That shouldn't be possible." Weber pulled himself deeper into the crater, watching as the American Sherman column continued advancing. They hadn't even paused after destroying his Panther. The lead tank simply traversed to acquire the next target while other vehicles moved forward to maintain formation. This was industrial warfare distilled to its essence. Remove obstacle, continue advance, accept no delay. "Hartmann," Weber managed, his voice hoarse. "Withdraw immediately. Radio battalion. Tell them the Americans have guns matching our 88. Frontal attacks are suicide." Static answered him. Then Hartmann's reply came slowly, as if the words required enormous effort to form. "Herr Hauptmann, doctrine requires we hold this position. Battalion will send reinforcements." Weber watched another Sherman's turret rotate toward Hartmann's concealed Tiger position. The Americans had clearly identified both German tanks and were systematically engaging with the cold efficiency of experienced hunters. "Hartmann, you have maybe 30 seconds before they range your position. Withdraw now or die for nothing." The radio went silent. Weber hoped it meant Hartmann was reversing his Tiger to escape the kill zone, but he suspected his friend was following doctrine that had become obsolete somewhere between Detroit's factories and the Rhine's east bank. The German army's tactical superiority had rested on technical advantages that American industry had finally matched through sheer determination and industrial capacity. He watched as the Sherman fired again, the 90mm gun recoiling smoothly into its mounting. The shell's flight seemed instantaneous at this range. He couldn't see where it struck, but the immediate explosion and rising smoke column told him everything necessary. Hartmann's Tiger, Germany's most powerful tank, destroyed by a weapon that shouldn't exist according to German intelligence assessments. Weber began crawling east, away from the American advance, using every crater and fold in terrain for concealment. Behind him, the Sherman column rolled forward across the Rhine Bridge, 12 tanks becoming 20, then 30, as reinforcements poured through the Remagen crossing. Each vehicle represented American industrial capacity, translating into tactical reality, overwhelming German technical expertise through simple arithmetic. By the time he reached German lines 2 kilometers east, Weber had counted over 50 American tanks crossing into Germany. Not all carried the new 90mm gun. Many still mounted the familiar 76mm weapons his Panther could have defeated, but enough possessed the upgraded armament to transform tactical calculations completely. The battalion commander, Major Steiner, listened to Weber's report with the grim acceptance of someone who had watched certainties crumble throughout a long retreat. "How many carried this new gun? Perhaps 1 in 4. Weber replied, accepting hot coffee from an aide with hands that trembled from shock and cold. "But it only takes 1 to change engagement parameters completely. Sir, we cannot continue frontal attacks against these vehicles. They can penetrate our best armor at ranges where our advantages disappear." Steiner studied a tactical map covered with annotations documenting the deteriorating situation across the Rhine. American forces were expanding their bridgehead hourly, pouring men and equipment across a river that should have provided Germany's last natural defensive barrier. The General Staff will want confirmation. They will say 1 lucky shot doesn't represent systematic capability improvement. Weber thought of Richter's scream, Müller's instantaneous death, Keller's wet gasping. "Sir, with respect, the General Staff can come forward and observe personally." That was not luck. That was engineering superiority delivered at combat range by a competent crew. If the Americans can do it once, they can do it systematically. Within hours, similar reports filtered through German command channels from multiple sectors along the Rhine. American tanks with unusually long guns were engaging German armor at extended ranges and achieving penetrations previously impossible. Intelligence officers, confronted with evidence their assessments had been dangerously incomplete, scrambled to update threat analyses and tactical recommendations. The response from higher command arrived by evening. All German armor units were ordered to avoid frontal engagements with American forces wherever possible. Ambush tactics, flank attacks, and urban combat where range advantages disappeared became the new doctrine. It was an implicit admission that German technical superiority, the foundation of armoured doctrine since 1940, had finally eroded beyond recovery. Weber sat in a ruined farmhouse that night, writing letters to families of his dead crew. Outside, the rumble of American armour continued as more vehicles crossed the Rhine, their engines creating a mechanical thunder that spoke of industrial capacity Germany could never match. Somewhere in that advancing tide were more 90mm guns, each one representing American determination to overcome German advantages through engineering and manufacturing, rather than accepting tactical inferiority. He thought about John Moses Browning, whose machine guns had taught similar lessons in previous wars. Individual genius could create temporary advantages, but industrial capacity determined long-term outcomes. Germany had possessed superior tanks, superior tactics, superior training, but America possessed factories that could iterate designs until they achieved parity, then overwhelm through numbers that German production could never approach. The mathematics were unforgiving. One 90mm armed Sherman might equal 1 Panther in frontal engagement, but America could field 10 such Shermans for every Panther Germany produced. When technical advantages disappeared, numerical superiority decided outcomes with mechanical inevitability. 6,000 kilometers away in Detroit, welders at Chrysler Tank Arsenal attached turrets to M4A, 3 hulls at a rate of 12 per hour, their torches writing obituaries for German armoured doctrine in molten steel and industrial efficiency. The women and men working those production lines would never meet Hauptmann Weber or learn his crew's names, but their labour, multiplied across hundreds of factories, was determining battlefield outcomes as decisively as any tactical genius. If you find this story engaging, Please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The tactical transformation rippled through German armoured forces with the speed of battlefield disaster. By late March of 1945, Wehrmacht intelligence compiled reports documenting American 90mm gun deployments across multiple sectors. Each report reinforced the same conclusion. German armour could no longer rely on standoff range to compensate for American numerical superiority. At Zossen, outside Berlin, staff officers studied the intelligence with professional despair. Colonel Heinrich Vogel, responsible for armoured doctrine development, read field reports that documented the collapse of assumptions he had spent years perfecting. The Americans have essentially matched our 88mm performance in a tank-mounted weapon. This eliminates our primary tactical advantage. His deputy, Major Wilhelm Krüger, spread ballistic analyses across the conference table. The reports indicate muzzle velocities approaching 900 meters per second, penetration capabilities exceeding 150 millimeters at 1,000 meters. If accurate, this performance equals or surpasses our KOK-43 gun mounted in the Tiger II. Vogel studied the numbers with the methodical attention to detail that had made him Germany's foremost armoured tactician. The implications cascaded through every level of defensive planning. German doctrine had evolved around maintaining range, where superior optics and gun performance allowed outnumbered forces to defeat larger American formations. That doctrine assumed American tanks remained armed with 75 or 76 mm guns, incapable of penetrating German heavy armour frontally. How many American tanks carry this weapon? Vogel asked, knowing the answer would determine whether tactical adjustments could salvage defensive effectiveness. Krüger consulted intelligence summaries compiled from multiple front sectors. Current estimates suggest 15 to 20% of American armour crossing the Rhine possess the 90mm gun. Production appears to be accelerating. By April, that percentage could reach 30% or higher. The mathematics were brutally clear. If 1 in 5 American tanks could engage German armour on equal terms, numerical superiority guaranteed American victory in any prolonged engagement. German forces would destroy some enemy vehicles, but attrition would favour the side that could replace losses faster. American factories could produce tanks faster than German forces could destroy them, while German production struggled to replace even minimal losses. Vogel made notes for tactical directives that would govern German armoured operations during the war's final weeks. Avoid open terrain engagements. Utilize urban environments where range advantages disappeared. Emphasize ambush tactics and first-shot kills. Withdraw after engaging rather than accepting sustained combat. Each directive represented abandonment of offensive doctrine in favor of survival tactics, acknowledging German capability had been systematically overwhelmed. Issue immediate instructions to all panzer divisions, Vogel ordered. When facing American armour, assume 1 in 5 vehicles possesses 90mm armament, capable of defeating any German tank frontally, at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. Adjust tactics accordingly. The directive reached frontline units within 24 hours, carried by motorcycle couriers racing through roads clogged with refugees and retreating forces. Tank commanders read the instructions with grim recognition. What they had experienced in isolated engagements was now official doctrine. The Americans had finally solved the technical problems that had given German armour battlefield dominance since 1941, but directives could not overcome industrial arithmetic. As American forces pushed deeper into Germany, they encountered increasingly desperate German resistance organised around remaining armour. Each engagement followed similar patterns. German tanks achieved initial kills through superior positioning and crew experience. American forces absorbed losses, brought forward overwhelming numbers, and eventually destroyed German positions through a combination of direct fire, artillery, and air support. The 90mm armed Shermans proved decisive in these engagements. German crews that had learned to engage American armour aggressively found themselves destroyed at ranges they had considered safe. Panthers and Tigers, once nearly invulnerable from frontal aspect, began appearing in intelligence photographs with penetrations through their thickest armour. The psychological impact on German tank crews proved as damaging as tactical losses. Hauptmann Weber, reassigned to a replacement Panther after his crew's death, participated in defensive actions east of the Rhine through April. He survived by following the new doctrine religiously, engaging only when possessing overwhelming advantage, withdrawing immediately after firing, never accepting sustained combat. His new crew, mostly teenagers with minimal training, learned quickly or died. One engagement crystallized the transformation in armored warfare. Weber's platoon, 3 Panthers in prepared positions, engaged an American column near Cassel. They achieved first-shot kills on 2 Shermans at 1,400 meters, exactly as doctrine prescribed. But the return fire came not from the expected 76mm guns, but from multiple 90mm weapons that had hung back, allowing older tanks to draw German fire. The American gunners had learned from their own losses. They now used standard Shermans as bait, keeping heavy gun variants in overwatch positions where they could engage exposed German tanks. Weber lost both his platoon mates in under 30 seconds, their Panthers penetrated by shells that travelled too fast to track. He withdrew only because his position offered covered retreat route that American gunners couldn't interdict. That night, writing after-action reports by candlelight in a cellar, Weber calculated the arithmetic of survival. His new crew had perhaps 2 weeks of life expectancy if combat continued at current intensity. The Americans were advancing 20 kilometers per day in some sectors. German resistance collapsed not from lack of courage, but from simple material exhaustion. No fuel, no ammunition, no replacement parts, no reinforcements. The 90mm gun was merely the most visible symbol of American industrial victory. Behind each tank rolled trucks carrying fuel from American refineries, ammunition from American factories, spare parts from American warehouses. Every component of American tactical effectiveness rested on industrial infrastructure that Germany, after 5 years of strategic bombing and resource depletion, simply could not match. By late April, organized German resistance west of Berlin had largely collapsed. Weber's unit received orders to withdraw toward the capital, part of final defensive preparations that everyone understood were futile gestures. His Panther, nearly out of fuel, was abandoned near Magdeburg when the engine seized from lack of proper oil. He and his teenage crew began walking east, joining columns of soldiers who no longer resembled an army but rather a refugee stream in Feldgrau. They passed burned-out German tanks with increasing frequency, many showing the characteristic penetration pattern of 90mm hits. Weber noted how American salvage crews were already recovering these wrecks, presumably for intelligence analysis and eventual scrapping. The efficiency was remarkable. Americans didn't just win battles, they systematically processed the aftermath, learning from every engagement and incorporating those lessons into doctrine and equipment. On May 1st, Weber's group encountered American forces near the Elbe River. A Sherman platoon, mix of 76mm and 90mm variants, had blocked the road. The Americans were professional and correct, accepting surrender without drama. Weber studied the lead tank, noting the long gun tube that had so decisively negated German armor advantages. An American lieutenant who spoke decent German approached. "Your tank crew?" Weber nodded, too exhausted for anything but truth. "Panther commander, was." The lieutenant gestured toward the Sherman with its 90mm gun. "What did you think when you first saw these?" Weber chose his words carefully. "I thought our advantages had ended. I was correct." The American nodded with the professional understanding of one soldier acknowledging another's expertise. "Your tanks were better, for a while. But we built more, and we made ours good enough. That's how it works." It was a concise summary of industrial warfare's fundamental principle. Superior quality could provide temporary advantage, but sustained production of adequate quality would eventually overwhelm through simple arithmetic. Germany had built perhaps 6,000 Panthers. America had built over 50,000 Shermans, Even when German tanks possessed technical superiority, the numbers made defeat inevitable. Weber and his crew were processed through prisoner collection points and eventually shipped to camps in France. He spent the next 18 months in captivity, working farm labor while Europe rebuilt. During those months, he had considerable time to reflect on the tactical evolution he had witnessed. The 90mm gun represented more than American engineering catching up to German capabilities. It demonstrated systematic problem-solving applied to warfare. American forces had identified a deficiency: 75mm guns inadequate against heavy armor. They had developed a solution: 90mm high-velocity weapons. They had implemented that solution across their armored forces while maintaining production of existing equipment. The entire process, from problem identification to fielded solution, had taken less than 3 years. Germany, by contrast, had spent the war's latter years developing increasingly sophisticated but difficult-to-produce tanks. The Tiger II, Jagdtiger, and other heavy armor represented engineering excellence that German industry could not manufacture in meaningful numbers. Each vehicle was technically superior to anything America fielded, but technical superiority was meaningless when you could field 10 vehicles against an enemy fielding 100. Released from captivity in 1946, Weber returned to a Germany divided and devastated. He never saw another tank except in newsreels and museums, but he followed armored warfare developments with professional interest. The 90mm gun that had destroyed his Panther became the standard weapon for American tanks through the Korean War and beyond. The M46, M47, and M48 Patton tanks all mounted variants of that original design. The weapon system that American engineers had rushed to develop in response to German Tiger tanks in North Africa served effectively for 2 decades, upgraded and refined but fundamentally unchanged. It was a testament to solid engineering executed with industrial efficiency, the same combination that had determined World War II's outcome once American production reached full capacity. In the 1960s, Weber was interviewed by military historians documenting German perspectives on the war. They asked about the moment when he understood Germany would lose. He described the morning on the Rhine when an American shell had penetrated his Panther's glacis at 1,300 meters, killing 3/4 of his crew instantly. That was the moment, he told them, when I understood we were no longer fighting just American soldiers. We were fighting American factories, American steel mills, American engineering schools. The soldier who destroyed my tank was competent, certainly. But the weapon he carried represented industrial capacity we could never match. When that capacity focused on solving our technical advantages, our defeat became mathematical certainty. The historians included his account in Creators, studies analyzing how technological and industrial factors determined World War II's outcome. But Weber suspected the real lesson was simpler. Wars between industrial nations were ultimately decided by production capacity applied systematically to identified problems. Individual brilliance, tactical expertise, and superior training could win battles, but sustained industrial effort won wars. The Sherman tank with its 90mm gun was not revolutionary technology. It was evolutionary improvement. American engineering identifying a deficiency and correcting it through combination of design work and manufacturing capacity. That methodical approach, less dramatic than German technical leaps but more sustainable, proved decisive when industrial warfare extended beyond quick victories into prolonged attrition. By the time Weber died in 1988, the M48 Patton tank he had first encountered on the Rhine had long since retired from American service, replaced by even more capable systems. But its fundamental weapon, that 90mm gun rushed to development in response to German armor, had served American forces for over 40 years. It remained a testament to industrial engineering solving tactical problems through systematic effort rather than revolutionary breakthroughs. In Detroit, the factories that had produced thousands of Sherman hulls had long since converted to peacetime production. The welders and machinists who had worked 12-hour shifts to arm American forces had retired, many never knowing how decisively their labour had shaped battlefield outcomes. But their contribution, multiplied across millions of workers in thousands of factories, had determined World War II's outcome as surely as any general's strategy. The 90mm gun that Hauptmann Weber had first observed through his commander's optic on a foggy March morning represented that industrial capacity made manifest. It was the moment when American engineering and manufacturing overcame German tactical advantages, not through revolutionary innovation but through systematic problem-solving backed by production capacity that could overwhelm any opponent through simple arithmetic. For German tank crews in the war's final months, that long gun tube meant the end of tactical advantages they had relied upon since 1941. For American soldiers, it meant finally possessing weapons that could engage German armour on equal terms. And for historians analysing World War II's outcome, it represented industrial warfare's fundamental principle demonstrated with mathematical clarity. Superior quality matters, but sufficient quantity deployed systematically will prevail through attrition no military genius can overcome. That lesson, written in the wreckage of burned tanks scattered across Western Europe, remained relevant decades after the guns fell silent. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.